Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, I got some bad news for a lot of you that are Outlaw, and great news for everybody who is a Warrior, Death Knight, or a Warlock. There's been a lot of changes happening to the game as of this upcoming Tuesday/Wednesday for the European servers. We got a massive nerf to Outlaw rogues in AoE, but also a couple class buffs and overall class changes. In this video, I'll cover everything you guys need to know, so let's get into the video. First of all, we're gonna go with the good news, all the buffs that are happening to a variety of different specs. Taking a look at some of the buffs that we have a buff update for Frost Death Knights as well as Unholy, where Blizzard is increasing their overall damage output by 5%. This change is going to be going into both PvE as well as PvP aspects of the game. So that's a pretty hefty buff for Unholy, which is already a beast in PvP. I wonder how heavy this buff is going to be. We also got a buff to Arms Warriors, buffing them by 5% in both PvP and PvE. Also, we got a Destro Warlock buff, also a 5% damage increase. Now, taking a look at all these specs, at first we're going to look at them from a PvE perspective. If you bring up the DPS rankings for every spec in the brand new raid Eternal Palace on Mythic, you will actually see where a lot of the specs are sitting on. Arms Warriors, Frost Death Knights, Unholy, and Destro populate a lot of the lower brackets, so Blizzard wants to give these specs a little bit more of a leg up to actually be competitive. This is good because I want to see more varieties of different specs and more players to play the specs they like, but also have them viable in order to be brought into certain raids as well as dungeons. But I do have to say that all these specs that Blizzard decided to buff that are DPS appropriate are actually one of the more dominant specs when it comes to PvP. Arms Warriors, Unholy Death Knights, and Destro Warlocks all hold their own when it comes to player versus player combat. And seeing a 5% buff on all three of those specs makes me, as a rogue in particular, a little bit more afraid of them. We do a lot of 5-5-1-1 duos, and all these specs besides Arms Warrior, which can actually still hold their own, but with a healer in Arena, that's where Arms is really scary in. Unholy Death Knights are already very powerful, very tanky, and are really annoying to deal with. Same thing goes for Destruction Warlocks, so much damage, and buffing them by 5% extra on top of already great damage output, it does feel a little bit scary. We'll have to see how strong this is once this goes live on Tuesday or Wednesday if you are on EU, but already I'm going to be very careful around Unholy Death Knights, even in random battlegrounds. We also got a massive update for Restoration Shamans, and Blizzard is trying to really buff up Shamans. We got ourselves a healing increase to Healing Surge, Healing Wave, and the mana cost of both of those spells is reduced by 5%. Healing Rain, healing increased by 20%. Riptide heal over time is increased by 15%. And Wellspring, the talent that's not often picked, is also increased by 15%. There's even a developer's note. In general, Restoration Shamans are struggling with single target healing environments, like Mythic Keystone Dungeons and Arenas. So we're buffing some spells from their single target kit. At the same time, we also feel like they aren't doing as well in a particular area where they should excel, healing a large number of targets in a small area. So increasing the strength of Healing Rain. Finally, Wellspring is an underperforming talent we feel could benefit from an increase to be competitive. This is good. I'm glad that Blizzard is taking time to buff certain specs that are just underperforming. I remember we saw a lot of Shamans, especially Resto Shamans, back in BOD, but right now in the Eternal Palace, on Mythic at least, they are far and few. Most people are specking Elemental, but also because Restoration just doesn't hold its own. I'm actually kind of excited about this change. I wonder how this is going to shake up the meta, and I think it'd be kind of cool to bust out my Resto Shaman again and heal some dungeons as well as raids. Now let's talk a bit about the Outlaw Rogue change. So the change to Outlaw is going to be for its AoE, primarily to nip it in the bud in Mythic Plus dungeons. The change is Blade Flurry now strikes all nearby additional enemies for 30% of normal damage instead of 45%, so that's a 15% nerf in AoE. And Keep Your Wits About You as a trait now increases the chance of Sinister Strike to strike again by 3%, instead of 5, and the maximum number of the stacks has been increased to 33, which means it's going to take a little bit longer for you to get the full 100% guarantee to cap out your Sinister Strikes, which I feel like is going to be less likely. Now, there's a couple theories floating around, and I'll give you guys 3 possible examples of what this change could be. Now, one of them is the doom and gloom scenario that you will see a lot on the forums, people saying that everybody's going to want to reroll out of Outlaw. Hell, if you haven't rerolled out of Outlaw to Assassination, you're wasting your time, because this spec is going to be dead in the water as soon as this change hits. This one I feel like is very unlikely. The second outcome is Outlaw will still be a top tier and a must-have in Mythic Plus dungeons, but you will not want to stack it how people are stacking it right now. Like, literally, Outlaw is so good right now that people are going triple Outlaw just to get the best times for MDI Mythic Plus dungeons. That's where the spec really thrives in. The last one is, this doesn't make a difference in terms of Outlaw damage. The damage is way too high, and even nerfing it by this much is still going to keep it a top tier spec. Triple going for Outlaw is still going to be the strongest build to go, mostly because Outlaw combos super well with Blade Flurry without having to sacrifice too much for pure single target or pure AoE output through your talents. You do decent single target with all these different essences, and with certain other essences that can combo for single target or AoE like Blood of the Enemy, you can get quite insane, ridiculous AoE or single target damage output. So those are the 3 different outcomes. Either the spec is going to be dead in the water, or it's going to be still super strong and nothing is going to change, or the middle ground, which is you probably want to bring 1 Outlaw to have a rogue, but you wouldn't want to triple stack it. I personally think it's too early to tell. I know this is going to affect our spec, but I do think out of the 3 possible options, I think it's going to be the middle ground, where you will want to bring 1 Outlaw rogue, and it's still going to be a decent spec. It's just not going to be quite as ahead as it was against all the other specs in pure AoE and single target output, primarily in Mythic Plus dungeons. What do you guys think? Do you think Outlaw is going to be dead in the water, still top tier, or more of a middle pack that's actually kind of nerfed down enough to be balanced with other specs? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We'll also have a couple nerfs for PvP, but not really nerfs, but more an offset to certain aspects of the game. First of all, Heart of Azeroth, all tier 3 Azerites, which are going to be your self-heal tiers, are going to be now reduced to 20% effectiveness instead of 50. Blizzard is going to be nerfing all of the self-sustaining, self-healing traits in order to speed up the games in arenas and make mana management and health pool management a little bit more over pressure in arena situations as well as battlegrounds. This is going to be an interesting change. I don't really know a lot of specs right now in the current meta that are triple stacked in certain traits in order to get a ridiculous amount of healing. So I do wonder how this is going to change the meta, if any. Maybe arena games will be a little bit faster and we'll have to rely on dampening a little bit less. Who knows? But I think it could be good. Then we also got a change to Unholy Death Knights to offset their 5% buff. Now Necrotic Strike, Necrotic Wound absorbs 5% of target's maximum health and healing, was 7%, and the melee attack damage and attack speed of Ray's Abomination Guardian has been decreased by 30%. Now this isn't a nerf to Unholy Death Knights, I don't think this will be a nerf, but this is really as a change to offset that 5% overall damage output that Unholy is getting. I do wonder how scary Unholy will be. I feel like this nerf is not really much of a nerf, but really just a floodgate to hold back the unholy power that is Unholy Death Knight. We also got a change, which I want to call this a nerf, but I can't really tell if it is a nerf or not, for mages. Temporal Shield will now have a 4-second duration instead of 6 seconds. Developer note says, while we like the predictive gameplay of Temporal Shield in response to offensive pressure, we think the duration provides too much protection for a class that should be focused on control and mobility for defense. Very, very interesting change. This is supposed to be a nerf to mages healing. I wonder if this is going to make that much of a difference. I feel like a nice Temporal Shield will still be able to help a mage survive quite a bit of burst, but a 6-second window I guess was too much. Didn't feel like it was, but you guys let me know in the comments, what do you think about this change? And that's going to wrap up everything that we have right now on the class updates. I'm actually honestly excited that there's class changes happening. I was waiting for something to come up. But instead, I was actually hoping like Frost Death Knights and Enhancement Shamans would get a pretty nasty buff, and maybe Blizzard will nerf certain specs that are overperforming in PvP. But instead, we actually ended up getting more a PvE-centric change. The change to Arms Warriors, Destro Warlocks, the Frost Death Knight, as well as Unholy, is to get him more playtime within dungeons and raids, which is good. The more variety you have in quality of different specs to play, the better. And anyway, I wanted to pick up Arms Warrior and try it out for PvE anyway, so this gives me more of a reason to want to do so. The change to Outlaw is going to be something to deal with, but Outlaw has been running rampant and was the king of Mythic Plus for such a very long time. So, of course, eventually the king has to be dethroned. I don't think this is going to be that bad of a change. Although, my guild did bring up a pretty good idea, and these guys are mostly PvE, whether it's Mythic Plus or raiding. They're very, very focused on that aspect of the game. They said that the metas have been made for Mythic Pluses as well as raids, and a lot of people figure out the compositions they want to run. So this is going to change up the compositions, primarily where Outlaw Rogue holds a lot of the groups together for Mythic Plus dungeons. So, while this is a sudden change out of nowhere, I see the reason why Blizzard would do it. I think it would have been maybe a little bit easier to do this change with patch 8.2.5, so people could see this change from a mile away and have plenty of time to test it, and maybe Blizzard could come up with a different change. But we'll have to wait till Tuesday and see how this goes. Overall, I want to be optimistic. Overall, I think this is good. They are buffing certain specs for PvE, and they're not changing Outlaw Rogue in single target. So we'll just have to wait and see how good or bad or how weird this is going to feel come Tuesday. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about all the class changes happening in this Tuesday reset, or Wednesday if you are EU. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see all of you in another video.